Gotta pay attention, Jules.
Don't pay any attention to what Mike says, Jules, you know. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's, I guess, Wednesday. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy. Those of you who said maybe there wasn't going to be a show today, no, that was Thursday and Friday, I think. We were potentially kicking that around. Mike's got a court appearance. I've got to be in D.C. I think we've concluded that we won't have a show on Friday, but we're tentative for tomorrow. So let's just jump right in this morning. Welcome, everybody. You know, this might be another one of those intergenerational differences that we're going to put on display. I saw a story last night, and admittedly, I'm not the most careful reader of the news. I let Mike read it for me and tell me what's important, which is my first mistake. Good morning, Michael.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning.
It's rainy and misty up here in New Haven. What's it doing down there in North Carolina?
It's been doing nothing but pouring for the last 24 hours. So, you know, all the plants are doing well. My lime trees are thriving, you know.
Good. Your lime trees?
Yeah, I planted some lime trees. It'll be a couple of years before they bear fruit, but I have this thing about fresh citrus at arm's length. I like that.
I have a funny story. When I hear the word citrus, I remember back in the day, this would have been in the late 1960s, early 1970s, the United States government decided to try to interdict drug trafficking across the Windsor-Detroit boundary. So they brought in some border patrol people from the Southwest. And one day, some friends and I were crossing into the United States from Windsor, and the Mexican-American Border Patrol agent asked us the predictable questions, including any citrus? And I looked at him and I said, "No, sir, we have no citrus." And that warranted a complete search of the car and pat down of our persons. Whether that was a reasonable search within the meaning of the Fourth Amendment didn't occur to me at the time, but it certainly earned me the scorn of my friends who told me to watch my wise mouth next time we crossed the border.
Yeah, as well it should, you know. That's funny.
So anyhow, it's an interesting story. I saw a story last night about Trump blasting his trial judges, then his supporters call for violence against the court. And of course, I was alarmed by that, because I'm always alarmed at calls for violence against the court. As some of you note, I have too much respect for the institution of the court. I believe it's where we go to resolve our conflicts in a principled way. And so scroll down into the story, Mike. This is a fellow, Pete, what's his name? Pete Eisler.
Yeah, Peter Eisler.
So Trump calls Merchan, Judge Merchan, the judge in his hush money case, the overseer of a kangaroo court who is highly conflicted. And then immediately, well, not almost immediately, then in response on social media, people begin to write things like, treason is a hangable offense. They should all be executed. I hope Trump has that judge hanged for treason. This judge must be arrested the minute Trump is inaugurated. Gallows for traitors. Judge needs a hatchet to the face. And I'm reading this and cringing, because what it's reminding me of in some respects is the run-up to January 6th. When there was a lot of vitriolic language about a stolen election, and then there was a riot. And the vitriolic language was used as proof of intent to plan, or at least proof of intent to be predisposed to implicitly agree spontaneously to use violence against the United States government. On Friday, I will be in D.C. entering a plea with a 3%er, I believe, a member of another group who used language like this prior to January 6th and then entered the Capitol. And that language is being used as proof of his criminal intent. Now, I hope that no one does engage in violence against Judge Merchan. Silly me, I think he's just doing his job. He's calling the balls and strikes as best he can with the case that has been brought to him by the litigants. Look at this, a colostomy bag, and his whore daughter. She should get a hatchet to the face. Needs to be strangled with piano wire before he makes it to the hangman. I mean, what is this? And I mean, we've had, and so I mean, Mike, I shared this with Mike, and Mike, of course, responded. Well, not of course. Mike responded with a deeper knowledge of the author. Apparently, he's a Johnny One Note, and this is a theme that he has written about repeatedly.
This article is funny to me, and Peter Eisler, I think Johnny One Note is a little too generous. It's like not even a whole note. It's like maybe an eighth note or something like that. Maybe a 16th if we're being technical. Whatever it is, Johnny One Note, Johnny eighth note, Johnny 16th note, treble clef, bass clef, whatever the balding, red goatee wearing guy with less followers than Norm on X, whatever we want to qualify him as.
There are people with less followers than me on X?
Yeah, there are, especially ones that do special reports for Reuters. Special report, 150 total posts since March. Oh my God. And what's incredible to me is, I think before I even finished reading this special report I sent to you, it's like, okay, yeah, we need to be taking this really seriously. And this is all really credible stuff. But let's not look at all at the actual attempts on the lives of SCOTUS justices just in the last little bit here, right? Those that have been prosecuted for advancing real life stuff against the justices. And then, of course, we get there, and I think I sent you a screenshot, and I said, oh, wait, here it is. And what he does is acknowledge that very briefly. He tries to draw this line between left-wing and right-wing political rhetoric as it relates to judges and judge safety and blah, 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 right? And I know that the shadows of January 6th are sort of looming large over this whole article, right? But Peter doesn't do anything except write about this. At every point, you can go back to, I guess, November, then August, and then even in 2022. Everything he does is in this narrow vein of something that Trump is doing to incite domestic extremism, right? So a broken clock might be right twice a day sort of theory. And in this article, he's so bold as to briefly acknowledge the left-wing activists which are responsible for the attempts on the lives of SCOTUS members, namely Brett Kavanaugh, but then explains it away by saying basically, but right-wing rhetoric online is worse, right? They say meaner things. And that's sort of the silliness of this all, Norm, is that, what occurs online is so voluminous and so prolific that this story belies the true nature of what's actually happening, right? So this is all, to me, relatively benign, right?
Wow.
And to you, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's where that generational divide perhaps is. You look at Reuters, which I want to pull this up because it's the best thing I saw yesterday, posted by Elon Musk. It's, tell me about yourself. I am dumb. You're hired. And they're in an office at Reuters headquarters there. I think that's great. And ultimately, this is sort of the type of journalism that we're getting. This doesn't advance anything for the average, for the casual reader, Norm. So for someone like you that might spend 20 minutes reading through this article and thinking through it critically, the fact that they referenced no more than 150 total posts and then tried to add into additional ones that there are some other ones that we didn't include that were, sexualizing or homophobic or whatever. It just devolves into this really this nothingness, this murky kind of, we need to say something negative to counter the fact that most of the nation believes that at this point that these are politically motivated proceedings against the front runner for president.
So, I'm listening to you, and I'm listening respectfully, and I'm trying to take in your point of view. For me, this just isn't a political issue. The right-left divide doesn't mean anything. If you believe that the courts are a place where there are neutral principles applied to the disputes brought before parties and resolved presumably under law in a principled way, calling for the death of a judge, whether from the right or left, is shocking in my view. And it's an example, in my view, of hate speech that has no value. This man should be, hung before or strangled with piano wire before he's hung.
Norm, when did you get? This is like so soft. I mean, it's nothing that hasn't been seen with equal and opposite fervor on the other side of that partisan divide. I
That's
mean,
the point I'm making. The partisan divide doesn't matter here. Civility does, and norms of speech and community building speech do.
The
And these
partisan divide
contribute
absolutely
nothing.
matters, because the levers of power are wielded by those that work at Reuters, that work at AP, that work at CNN, that actually reach people like you, Norm, that still have trust and faith in these institutions as doing right by their readers. And the reality is something totally different than that.
Well, when the streets run with blood, you'll be satisfied and you'll think somehow that this is a step forward historically. I don't. I think this sort of speech normalizes violence and has the potential to encourage it and contributes nothing.
Here's my 30,000 foot view. I've said a couple of years ago, and I'm going to toot my own horn here for a moment, but I said something to the effect of, we're entering an informational dark age. You've heard me, Norm, talk before about the great flattening of everything good, right? Knowledge, music, video, whatever, in terms of discoverability. And the way the internet has flattened individual discovery of these things. I think about the easiest comparison from a music perspective is think about digital streaming platforms now, DSP, Spotify, Apple Music, that kind of thing. And the way that music is now curated for people who for young people, and what the discovery of music and genres is like as compared to your discovery of music, Norm, or think about literature, what that might look like now in a world that is highly online and highly flattened. The problem is that the hierarchy, the hierarchical structure, the meritocratic structure of knowledge and of these databases and history has been flattened such that new listeners, new readers, young people looking to make their way in the world, they need guidance from those like you, Norm, right? But you are not in abundance. Minds like intellects like yours, experience like yours is not in great abundance. What we have in great abundance is the domination of online search algorithms via AP, Reuters, Apple Music. So whatever big major labels are distributing and they're putting their money behind, they're going to make their money back because they control the path to market. They control mind share because they control this flattened frame of discoverability of information. That's the reality that we live in right now, and
I'm trying to push back on it, at least with respect to these facile calls for violence against public officials, by saying whatever algorithmic charge this gets, or however it makes a cash register somewhere go ka-ching, it's just not in the public interest. I think normalizing calls for violence against public officials increases the likelihood of it. This isn't expressing viewpoints and disagreements with the judge's ruling. It's calling into question whether he should be killed for doing his job. And there is no value in that. None. As a matter of social.
So you sound like you would support the proposition that, freedom of speech is not freedom, does not guarantee freedom of reach, right? Is that something that you would get
behind? I don't
behind?
understand what you just said. That's how antiquated I am.
Right. So what's developed behind pushes for platform censorship on Facebook, on X, and other major purveyors of online information and social activity has been this notion that platforms are in control of what information is able to go viral or able to scale and reach like higher levels of visibility to other people that might not directly follow the producer of a given thought or a tweet or a post or whatever, right? And so the notion is, if there are algorithms that can identify certain content that we classify as invaluable or whatever you want to say, hateful, blah blah, right? That the algorithms are designed to suppress that, to prevent other people.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And who controls the algorithm controls the content. And the algorithms are largely invisible. That's a great point. We are well beyond the era of newspapers delivered to your stoop morning and evening, or 30 minutes of evening news.
Because in that era, in that more analog era, I think I'm only now becoming wise to this, because I think the technological advantage of news now or operating in the online world is obviously that immediacy, that direct path to the user. But in the more analog world, written word had to have more staying power. It had to.
Well, it was also edited and curated and considered before published.
Well, that's what I mean. Is that now these platforms can just edit a story and republish it within minutes if they need to if they realize that the online reaction is something somewhat negative, right? They can just kind of fix things. In the prior era, there was no such thing as being able to edit tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of newspapers that were going out every day, and therefore the content of those publications had to have staying power. It had to have a more solid foundation and survive at least base level scrutiny. Primary.
No, I get you. Dawn, I want to quickly tip my head in the direction of Dawn McNeil's question. Dawn, who I respect, obviously, is a retired sociologist and very well-read and wise woman who plays pickleball, by the way. Norm, why do you think Mershon is legit, not based in his rulings? So the concept of legitimacy here means, does he lawfully occupy his role? There is a concept in the law known as quo warranto. It's a doctrine that permits you to challenge a person's ability to hold his office by claiming that he or she does not hold his office legitimately. Years ago, my office was to challenge the Bridgeport superintendent of schools as unfit for his office. We took a quo warranto action to the Superior Court, and ironically enough, it was Alex Jones's judge who granted that writ and held that the man was unfit for office. The Supreme Court reversed it. So the question is, and I want to construe it narrowly. Norm, why do you think Mershon is legit? Because he was appointed and selected to occupy the role he did under settled procedures. Do I agree that all of his rulings are necessarily well-founded in law? No. But I don't think that you go from disagreeing with the judge's rulings to calling for his execution. That to me is absurd. What you do is you take the case to the appellate court and you ask the appellate court to reverse. If the appellate court doesn't, you've got a higher court. If you end up losing a case that has been decided according to law, does that give you a right then, some sort of existential right to wage war on the system? I mean, read your Locke and read your Hobbes and read your Rousseau. We leave the state of nature, so to speak, this situation where everyone has the right to do what's right in their own eyes, to advance their interests as they conceive them, for the benefits of civil society. And one of them is submitting our disputes to principled resolution in a legal forum, or we could lose and the forum could get it wrong. I guess I'd turn the question on Dawn. Dawn, do you think Mershon should be killed because you disagree with some of his rulings? And if the answer is yes, look in the mirror, girl, and ask yourself where you're living.
I don't think that I don't ascribe that view to Dawn, and I'm sure she would.
I don't either, but that's a lot. It flows from where she's coming from.
Yeah. So a couple of things here. And Jules says, at best, Mershon has acquired the appearance of bias, and I think that that's true. But I want to get to a couple of things here. It might get us a little deeper into the real issue, Norm, and not to shit on any of your points or even my own.
Go ahead.
But Anonymous asks, Michael, do you think the algorithms across most platforms try to shape the overall narrative? Is this a conspiracy or just lack of diversity of thought? And it's a great question, and I'm going to marry that question with the comment from Daisy Girl, who says, no way do I think it was Trump supporters who wrote all of that stuff. Violence is straight out of a leftist playbook. Republicans have had to learn how to talk to each other online. That's not regular chat. And so there's two things there, right? We've realized in the modern era that the federal security apparatus is highly involved online, Norm, right? There are anonymous accounts that are run by federal law enforcement agents of varying, acronyms and agencies in the country. And so one thing that's interesting to me is the fact that we would assume that all of the comments online, the ones that clearly create objection in your mind to the value of the speech, that they're actually coming from someone who sincerely holds those views and doesn't actually have an ulterior motive, something akin to raising the profile of the this motif that domestic extremism is on the rise in the political right. It just seems very convenient. So I think that, Daisy Girl, to your point, I respect what you're saying with that, to say no way do I think it was Trump supporters who wrote all that stuff. I don't know, I would go so far as to say it was zero Trump supporters, but I would support the proposition that we should not assume that anonymous accounts online saying things that are objectively objectionable in terms of what you were just talking about with Dawn, Norm, that those are genuine comments.
Well, I mean, many of them are, and I know this because of the people and clientele that I have and speak to on the phone. These are, you can't say that any hostility is that is being expressed is a left-wing trope imposed on the right for purposes of creating a crackdown on the right by the left, as orchestrated by the deep state. I mean, that's just crazy.
Yeah, Catherine. Curtis Maver, thank you for the $5 tip. Curtis.
Yeah, thank you, Curtis.
Norm, look at the attack on the White House in 2020 versus that of January 6th. Both bad, but one forgotten. Other was used as a weapon.
No question about the fact that this was politicized, and I am with you 100% on that.
And I'll never forget the images of Donald Trump holding up the Bible, coming out of as he's walking across the yard from after the church burned down. Right after they.
So let me propose this to everybody. I'm likely to face a 6-month suspension because of my conduct in the Alex Jones case, at least in the eyes of the trial judge. The appellate court will rule any day. It has been proposed to me that I write a book on January 6th, what I saw at the Proud Boys trial and how the event has become politicized. And I've begun that. I don't know if you guys would be interested in that. But, it seems to me that this discussion of politics, who was responsible, what's going on in the country, and why January 6th has become a thing, and a discrete chapter in American politics is worth examining. And this discussion seems to prove it. I just don't know, Mike. I honestly don't know what to think about some of the things you say. I mean, I understand that there are all these agencies out there with operatives and so forth. I understand big tech.
Well, we don't even have to go that far. I remember what's the black politician out west? I forget her name at the moment. Older politician that was saying, in front of her own crowd, encouraging people to.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Somebody.
Look, and I want to go to something that Blue Raptor said. Trump can't do anything to please Norm. I don't know that he can or can't. I don't particularly care about Trump, Blue Raptor Bird.
Maxine Waters. That's right.
Yeah, Maxine Waters. He's your candidate, not mine. He's not. Biden is not my candidate. I don't know that I'll be voting this year. I'm that discouraged about it all. But let's move on. It's a right topic, and I'd love to disagree with you, Mike. I love to see the dark side of error as reflected in your dulcet tones and sweet demeanor.
Guy Vermectin, Anonymous, Pat Hacker, thank you. Maxine Waters is indeed the name, and then Jackson Baird over on Rumble. Maxine.
Maxine. I remember that when she was. I think it was out in. She appeared in Minneapolis, outside her jurisdiction, in the era of George Floyd.
This I think what makes me nervous, just to put a button on this, what really concerns me about this sort of narrative coming from the likes of Reuters, from writers that are not popular at all and have 1/16th note to offer us in terms of a view, is that we talked last week about the rising scrutiny of Christian nationalism. And there is an inextricable link in my mind between the security state and the federal law enforcement agencies, scrutiny of what we would call rising domestic extremism, and what the political left is also characterizing as emblematic of Christian nationalism. And therefore, and Trump is not immune to that sort of scrutiny or criticism, right? And certainly his voters and his base are not either. And so to me, for us to take too seriously 150 comments that are given to us by Reuters online by accounts that can't be verified as real people, or if they are real people, who those real people actually are in the grand scheme, is just really ridiculous. And think about the optics, right, of this special report. Again, I'm going to go back. I mean, this is something that Reuters is spending a lot of creative energy on, right? In God we trust, the courtroom. Trump blasts his trial judges, then his fans call for violence. A Reuters special report, and it's not a short story. I mean, this is a long article, right?
But here's the problem I have. One could have said the same thing about all the anonymous chatter on Telegram, as between the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, and company elsewhere. And they were real people. And a comprehensive federal investigation yielded the fact that there were identities associated with that. And then months were spent presenting that evidence in an open court. So let's just keep an open mind on this one and move on. On this topic of Christian, I hadn't planned to pivot in this direction. I wasn't sure that I wanted to today.
What are we talking about?
Punch in Chiefs kicker Harrison Butker.
Yeah, I saw this.
So, Butker has decided to enter the culture wars in a big way that is consistent with the themes that we're discussing today. He's called Pride Month an example of the deadly sins as he advocates for a more conservative brand of Catholicism. I've talked about the bottom falling out of pluralism and the pot saying to the potter, why makest me thus? And the pathology of identity being such that we all become idols in our own right. And so Butker's comments resonate with me to a certain degree. But in terms of respect for persons, and love of all, I don't know that I am comfortable with Butker's taking the Billy Sunday approach. That is, transforming his Billy Sunday being an evangelist of a century or so ago, who was a great baseball player, and then transformed his ball playing popularity into being a religious spokesman. We've talked before about the United States potentially being on the cusp of another great spiritual awakening. We have them every 50 to 80 years in this country. We're overdue. We're adrift. We seem to be a people without a spiritual foundation or core, tearing at one another and unable to speak. And so here comes Harrison Butker seeking to occupy this space with language, Mike, that mirrors what you were talking about in terms of the critique of Christian nationalism. I'm not sure what to make of Butker. How do you situate his comments?
Well, like I said, I saw it and I didn't have time to actually dig into what he said, so I'm ignorant as to the content of the speech. I just saw that he said something along the lines of the commitment to faith, and then I guess was more of a criticism of what is going on in American culture. Do you have more of a synopsis? And
just generally that I think Butker would agree with me in saying that to the degree that we each valorize or place the ultimate value on our identity. And that identity becomes more important than our commitment to God, somehow we've sinned, because as Augustine says, sin is love of the wrong thing. And so I think what Butker was trying to do is recall or call the nation back to a sense of spiritual foundations, in his view, in a robust version of Roman Catholicism. Others might do so in a form of Protestantism, but to the degree that anyone does so in an overtly Christian way, they're going to open themselves to the critique of being a Christian nationalist, and therefore running contrary to the narrative now, which seems to be diversity for diversity's sake. So I look at Butker's remarks as easy to identify within the context of a culture in a culture that's frayed. I'm not sure that I look at it as a constructive solution any more than I would say electrifying the Rio Grande is a constructive solution to immigration reform. Certain changes are.
Oh, you don't like hydroelectricity, Norm? Goodness gracious! I thought you liked green energy. Just kidding.
A friend of mine's brother, we were talking the other day, and somebody said build the wall, and he said, I've got a better solution: electrify the Rio Grande. And I looked at him and I said, are you serious? Absolutely, he said with a twinkle in his eye. There is that level of anger out there in the world, anger at the other. And I think that with respect to the spiritual foundations that we have, when there was a sort of cultural commitment to common norms, to excellence, to what I'll call the Judeo-Christian tradition, it was easier to situate our broader culture in the Ciceronian commitment to a common conception of right. I think we've lost that now, and Butker is making a powerful callback at Benedictine College to a foregone era.
Well,
I'm not sure
he's cool. You know what's cool
what?
about this story? We have a loose personal connection to this speech norm. I don't know if you knew. I didn't until I was reminded just a moment ago. Lawyer Will is in the chat today. What up, Will? He says the kicker was speaking at a college where my brother is a Benedictine monk.
There you go.
And we should have remembered that.
Well, I forgot that. I didn't realize that there was a third Pete and repeat. You know?
Oh God, yeah, there is for sure. One is a monk, and the other is in our chat, and another doesn't show up anymore. Will, so I'm gonna need you to check on your other brother.
Well, so I mean, it's an interesting speech. I encourage people to look at it and to consider the message and to ask, you know, where are we headed as a people? Because I think that's really the important point in speeches of this, is when we seek to talk about the nature and destiny of humankind in a collective function, we really do build a community in which we can all live. And whether that is a message that's consistent with the algorithmic overlord's desires is an open question. But it's a question we need to consider, and it's a question we do consider here on Law and Legitimacy.
Yeah. So before we get out of here, I don't want to. I want to hit at least something quick about this, and maybe we're just teeing this up to discuss in more detail, Norm. But Alabama Governor Kay Ivey signed Senate Bill 23 into law this week, and it bans what are regarded as cultivated food products, or those that are cellular grown proteins, chicken, beef, etc. And this, Alabama is not on its own in this. I think on May 2nd, if memory serves, Governor DeSantis in Florida did a similar thing in signing into law a bill banning the cultivation of lab-grown meat and the wholesale distribution thereof and the retail sale thereof within the state of Florida. And quickly, I think that my big takeaway with this, because I was trying to give this some consideration this morning as to what it means. I think on one hand, I can acknowledge that this is we do have private markets for a reason, right? And that there are credible arguments that these legislative moves are in error for legal and other reasons. However, and economic reasons. However, I want to at least point out, and maybe we use this as sort of the territory to jump off from in future discussions. I want to point out that the populist impulse to reject lab-grown meat is a proxy for a rejection of the likes of the World Economic Forum, the World Health Organization, and it is a collective. It appears to me to be a collective recognition that everything is becoming artificial, right? And that there isn't custody over, there is an encroachment on real life in almost every facet of one's individual day to day. And lab grown protein, in conjunction with this really arbitrary and ill conceived Green New Deal talk, right? The push for green energy, the electrification of our vehicle fleets around the country, right? Without in sort of the abandonment of fossil fuel. It's all wrapped up together. And so I think that these governors, respectively, Governor Kay Ivey and Governor Ron DeSantis, whether these are legally and or economically sound decisions to make, that is not simply vetoing these bills as they are passed, but rather allowing them to take force and effect legally as law. It seems like that is a political move, recognizing the populist impulse of their respective voting bases. And I'm not certain that I really disagree with that populist impulse, Norm. I think that's where I am right now.
Well, I mean, I agree. And we've talked before about the individual quest for significance and the protagonist in every dystopian novel, 1984, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, Handmaid's Tale, always someone who decided that rather than being satisfied with what the world had to offer, they'd seek their own course and pay the consequences. And I think that is the populist impulse for significance. As a legal matter, I find these cases interesting because clearly the states have police power in order to and have the right to regulate in the health, education, and welfare of their citizens. And so, if they make a reasoned decision that lab-grown meat is inconsistent with the public health of their residents, well, that's probably a decision they have a right to make. However, this is going to raise Chevron concerns. And at what point, is this really a naked assertion, not just of populism, but of the power of agribusiness? And is there going to be a rational basis for this decision? And will it yield constitutional challenges? And I think the answer is yes and yes. And yes to the populist impulse. It's a multifactorial analysis of a complex phenomena that we promise to keep an eye on.
Yeah, Jackson says it's a recipe for food contamination glitches, 3D printed meat. Nanotech is an existential threat, and I think that's correct. That when I talk about the populist impulse, and the sort of the lack of custody over or an organic lifestyle. I mean, it's one thing to oppose factory farming in the traditional sense, right? Having high density, chicken production facilities, and that's the whole like free range movement for protein and beef, and grass fed, grass finished beef as we're coming to know it now. That's one thing to think about the lifestyle of the living organisms before slaughter. Is something totally different, Norm, I think, to take what our nourishment, our nutrition into the hands of those that are, working with petri dishes, and are doing things and have done things from a pharmaceutical context in the last several years. I'm not going to say the buzzwords, but there's a total lack of faith in the FDA, and the CDC. And even if the FDA has approved the use of these sorts of manufactured or cultivated meats, that doesn't mean anything to a population that perceives those institutions as wholly illegitimate under current conditions, right?
Hey, Janet Schmidt, what did Nancy Pelosi say at the Oxford Union? I didn't even know she was there. Do you have any idea, Mike?
No, I saw a reference to Oxford, but good God, man.
One of my children works for the
Oxford. Fire hose out here, man.
Works for the Oxford University Press in England, and I was at the post office last night renewing my passport, or yesterday afternoon, so that I could go out and visit him there. And I've never been to Oxford, so I'm looking forward to that. But I'd love to see what Nancy Pelosi had to say. I'm surprised she got an invite there. Somehow I don't view her as having the sort of crystalline sharp intellect that it takes to survive on your feet at the Union. Debate between democracy and populism. That does look interesting. Thank you, Janet, for the heads up. We will give it a look. Folks, we've talked our way to the end of today's episode. Thank you for listening. Thank you for those of you who contributed likes and shares and so forth. Mike and I renew our reminder to you. We're trying to build and monetize this platform in a way that makes it truly independent. Baby steps thus far, but steps nonetheless that are real. And those of you who have joined us thus far, thank you. Spread the word. We're out there. Yes, I am trying to work on my technological issues and the sound quality, and I'm almost there. I think that in our next broadcast, I may be there to your delight.
But yeah, I think this is fun for me. Every part of it is fun for me, because as stubborn as you all might think Norm is intellectually, imagine how Norm is with technology. I joke. But we're close.
I'm stubborn?
Oh yeah, definitely stubborn. Well, you're very, I will say maybe stubborn, impatient is a better way to describe it. But the thing is, you've got all the infrastructure. You've had all the infrastructure. I think now it's just a matter of us putting the pieces together. And I'm looking forward to getting the sound quality kind of pulled together, and then we'll focus on some visuals. In the meantime, we really appreciate how much support we have from you all. Our subscriber base over on YouTube is far in excess of 1,700 subscribers now, which is still just blowing my mind, Norm. Rumble is starting to grow again, which I'm really thankful for everybody that shows up daily on Rumble. I think I'm going to work in an upcoming weekend to be able to at least put some of the Rumble chat into a text box on the screen so that at least some of you that are here every day, even though StreamYard, which is the platform we use, even though StreamYard doesn't exactly help us out with being able to post the comments like we do for YouTube or for X, there's still a lot of you that I think are worthy of some publication, especially if because we get tips over there too, Norm. So
here's what Dawn didn't say. The sound quality is fine for me. It's the content that kills me. Love you, Dawn. Have a great day at Pickleball. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Where do people find us, Mike?
Hey, we're here on YouTube, we're on X, and we're on Rumble at LawPod Daily. Please make sure you're subscribed. Please make sure that you have liked this stream. And if you're feeling generous, leave a comment wherever you are. We're also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, Audible, any of those, experience flattening digital streaming platforms I referenced earlier. You can find us there. Just search Law and Legitimacy, search Norm Pattis, search LawPod Daily. Norm, thank you as always for giving me a good fight, a good one.
And I am off for day 7, I think it is, of jury selection in People versus State of Connecticut versus Leon Guerrera, a murder case, which I expect to win, I'm telling you, on the basis of self-defense. We'll find out whether my expectations are right. AMF, Yo-Yo. Hey, wait a minute. It shows that some old guy. I had to adjust my glasses.
Y'all are the best, man.
AMF, Yo-Yo.
AMF, Yo-Yo. Have a blessed day. Have a beautiful day. Same to all of you. See you later, my man over there at Gold Store CT. Bye, Norm. See you tomorrow.
Bye.
See you, everybody.